I'd like to welcome you back for our lesson. I welcome you back for the break that we had and from where we stopped. This time we are going to start from where we stopped last time. And I think the work that I gave last time, many people have already worked on it. And I expect to have at least the time of marking it and doing correction in it. Now, on last lesson when we met here, I was basically looking at the levers. Maybe to take us back for a review, we said a lever is a stiff rod which turns on a fixed point. A stiff rod which turns on a fixed point. That is what we gave as a definition of a lever. And we also looked at examples of levers. Besides the examples of levers, we also went ahead and we looked at what we call the types of levers. And we said there are basically 3 types of levers. These 3 types of levers that we talked about include first-class lever, second-class levers, then third-class levers. Therefore, in this lesson, as I promised you last time, that we are going to look at these levers each at a time to make sure that we get them and we don't forget them. This afternoon, we are going to look at, to pick out of the 3 classes of levers, we shall look at mainly the first-class lever. I remember I asked questions in the last lesson and I was saying, why is this one called the first-class levers? Why is this one called the second-class levers? And why is it that the other ones are called the third-class levers? There are specific reasons why they are given those names. Therefore, we are going to see why are other levers referred to as the first-class levers. Therefore, we are looking at the first-class levers. These first-class levers, I have written it clearly on the chalkboard here. We have abbreviations that I've used here. EPL stroke LPE. We shall come to see what do these abbreviations, how did I get this exactly? Therefore, I'm giving the definition of the term first-class levers. First-class levers, these are types of levers whose pivot is between the effort and the fulcrum and the load. These are types of levers whose pivot or fulcrum is in between the load and the effort. The fulcrum is in between the load and the effort. That is what makes first-class levers different from all other classes of levers. Therefore, at the first point when we're looking at first-class levers, we mainly looked at the parts of the lever. Now, when I talk about the terms as fulcrum or the pivot, I believe everyone understands what I'm talking about. A pivot is a turning point of a lever, the point at which a lever turns from. That is what we refer to as a pivot or a fulcrum. The load is a force or weight of the body to be overcome, while the effort is the force that is needed to overcome the weight of the body or to overcome the body that is seated on the other side. Therefore, on some of the definition that I have said so far, I would like to repeat this once more. I said first-class levers. These are types of levers in which the pivot is between the effort and the fulcrum, and the load. Therefore, we look at here. On the last lesson, I said letter E represents the effort, and letter P represents the pivot. Letter L represents the load. I repeat this. Letter E represents the effort. Letter P represents the pivot or fulcrum. And letter L represents the load. That is how we got this. We are seeing the pivot is in between the effort and the load. The pivot or the fulcrum is between the effort and the load. Or someone can start with the load and says the pivot is between the load and the effort. The pivot is between the load and the effort. That is what makes this class of machines to be, levers to be called first-class levers, because their turning point, which we are calling the pivot, is between the effort and the load. Therefore, I can give a simple acronym for us to remember this, first-class levers. For example, how can I remember the definition of first-class levers faster? I can use this acronym. I'm going to use this acronym here, the first one with the L. This one here, LPE. LPE. The acronym that I'll use there, or the acronym is a word or a sentence that can help us to remember something easily. Therefore, I'm going to use the acronym that will help you to remember what first-class levers are. Here, since L is the one that is starting, I'm starting with this one here. Since L is the one that is starting, we are going to make L, we are going to call L load. The other load that all of us we know, the load we pray to, that one is going to stand for our Lord. L is going to be represented by Lord, the word Lord. Then, letter P. I say the L will be represented by the word Lord. Then P, which is the pivot, we are going to put there a word that will help us to remember that. P we are going to replace it with we are going to say, put there the word prayer. We shall put there the word prayer. P, prayer. L, Lord. Then E, we are going to use the word every day. Every day. Now, for us to remember the first-class levers in a simple way, as in a primary 7 candidates, I'm giving this. You can say, we are going to include the word first. First say. I am going to use these words here. Listen to me carefully. I'll say. First say, I repeat this. First say the Lord's Prayer every day. First say the Lord's Prayer every day. I repeat it. First say the Lord's Prayer every day. That acronym helps us to understand. Now, the word first, that one, the moment you mention the word first, you get to understand that I'm talking about first-class levers. Now, when you mention the word Lord, the word Lord I think is not very far. We say the Lord we are using here is the other Lord that we know, that we pray to. But the actual sense we are meaning the other one of the weight that is supposed to be overcome. Now, first, I've said stands for the first-class levers. Lord stands for the very Lord. Then prayer stands for pivot. Prayer stands for pivot. Every stands for the word effort. Therefore, the acronym we are using there is first say the Lord's Prayer every day. That acronym will help us to remember what we call the first-class livers, the definition of these first-class livers, where we said the pivot is between the Lord and the effort. That is the first acronym that we can use. I have used this one. First say the Lord's Prayer every day. Now, that is the acronym we can use here. I do not want to give you the other one because you might confuse them. So let us take that one. Now, we are looking at these first-class livers. The first-class livers, the best example that I can talk of, we can talk about items like a seesaw. Now, with the first-class livers, as we are seeing, this boy seated here and the Lord is this side. This one here is the effort. While this boy needs to push back the stone up. So this boy is the effort, while the stone is the Lord. The point at which this stiff rod here, where the boy is seated and the stone is seated, this part here, where we are seeing this P here, this one here is the pivot, where this lever has to turn to balance the boy and the stone. Therefore, our NB here, we have to know this very well. We are saying the longer the effort arm here, the longer the effort arm, the smaller the energy or the effort needed to lift this stone. When this boy is seated at the end of this lever here, this boy can easily lift this stone from this side. Because the effort arm, from the effort to the fulcrum, this is what we call the effort arm. It is long enough. However, this boy is going to face a challenge. When he extends up to here, let us assume this boy is seated now here at point A. This boy is going to use much energy at point A to lift this stone than when he's seated on this area here. I'm going to give you this practical way. You can get it, for those ones who can get at least some kind of rod at home, and you get a stone, you put the rod on the stone, then you can sit one person on the other side and one person sits this side. And you keep on extending towards the fulcrum, then you will see, we shall come to notice this. This one, we can do it practically, and we get to know that the longer you are from the fulcrum, or the longer the effort arm, the less energy is used to lift the load. However, when you're close to the fulcrum or the pivot, you will need much energy to lift the load. Then on the other side, we are also saying the advantage of using the first-class lever. The advantage of using the first-class lever is that less energy or less effort is used. When we are using first-class levers, it requires very less energy to use. For example, if you're shaving someone's hair, you don't have to use all of the energy in your body. You just have to play with the fingers. That is the less energy that is required when you are using first-class lever. That is the advantage of using first-class levers. I said, advantage of using first-class lever is that less energy is used. Now, we are looking at examples of first-class levers from the definition that we gave here, where we said, in first-class levers, the pivot or the fulcrum must be in the middle of the effort and the load. That is what we are seeing here. On the examples of first-class levers, we are looking at a seesaw. Now, with a seesaw, we are seeing here, this side L stands for the load. I remember last time I was giving you those abbreviations, and I was saying load is also represented by L. Pivot can also be represented by P. Fulcrum can also be represented by letter F. And effort can also be represented by letter E. This is where we have started using those letters. Now, when you see L, this one represents the Lord, stands for the Lord. Where there is P, this one is the pivot, the turning point of the first class levers. Then we have E, which stands for the effort, the force that is needed to lift the load from this side, or the body. That is what we refer to as the effort. Now, looking at the examples of the first class levers, a seesaw. When we look at this seesaw properly, from our definition, the pivot or the turning point must be between the effort and the load. Here, we look at the pivot. The pivot is here. The load is this side. And the effort is this side. Therefore, the pivot is between the load and the effort. The pivot is between the load and the effort. That is what makes a seesaw to be grouped under first class levers, because the pivot is between the load and the effort. So this is one of the examples of first class levers. We have a seesaw. The second example that we can have is what we call pinchers. Pinchers could be, we must have not seen this because it is not very common in our community. But I'm going to give you the local example of I can give you a local example of a pincher, the use of a pincher. Assuming something, or assuming a glass or a stone or some thorn has pierced your legs, and someone cannot use their fingers to pull it out. In most cases, someone will get some kind of a metal that can be used. One side is sharp, then the other side, which looks like, a pincher looks like a pair of scissors, but for it, it has the curved ends and sharp on the end that is used to remove the things are sharp. Therefore, a pincher is used to remove things like nails, as we are seeing it from here. The nail has been hit here on the timber. Therefore, to remove this nail, someone can use a pincher from here. This one can be like a wall. This one can be someone's foot or the leg. When a thorn has entered your leg, they can use a pincher to handle that stone or a nail. And from this side, this one here is the effort, where you handle it from. While this one here, the pivot, we can see where it is, this point here. This is where the pincher turns from, where it moves freely. This is the pivot. However, what the pincher is holding, the thorn, the nail, or anything that is used to be carried by that pincher, that is what we call the load. That is what we refer to as the load. Therefore, when we look at the pincher, we are seeing the pivot from our definition of first class levers. The pivot must be between the load and the effort. I repeat this. From the definition of the first class levers, the pivot or the fulcrum must be between the load and the effort. Therefore, we are seeing the load L, which is the nail on the wall. Then we are seeing the pivot here, the turning point of this machine. Then we are seeing here the effort, where you hold it, where a person is going to use for holding it, this area here. This one here is the effort on a pincher. So pinchers are examples of first class levers also. We are looking at the third example, that is a claw hammer. A claw hammer, I believe all of us have seen this, though we used just to call it a hammer without the word claw. But that machine is called a claw hammer, not a hammer, please. You must write there the word claw. It is called the claw hammer, not a hammer. Therefore, this claw hammer here is used by carpenters and builders to drive the nail into the timber. If the nail has not entered well, they can also use that same claw hammer to remove the nail from the timber, as we are seeing from here. This one here is the timber where the nail has been driven into. Now, looking at this claw hammer, the nail here, where we are seeing Lord is here, L. The nail becomes the Lord. The nail that they are removing becomes the Lord. Then the point at which the hammer, that claw hammer is touching, because when you're removing that nail, at least there is a part of the claw hammer that will need to lean on the table or on the wood when you're removing it. That place there where that claw hammer, the head of the claw hammer, supports itself on the timber, that is the place that becomes the pivot. And the place where a human being handles, that place, your hand, where your hand lies, that one becomes the effort. So the pivot is between the Lord and the effort. The pivot or the fulcrum is between the Lord and the effort. This arrow here, the arrow that we have shown here, is showing the direction of effort force. When you're removing this nail here, you will need to hold this hammer from here and press it downwards. You press it downwards. That pressing downwards is shown by this arrow. That is the movement of the effort force, the movement of the force that is being applied to remove the nail. That is the third example of a first-class lever, which is a claw hammer. The fourth example of a first-class lever, we also talk about a pair of scissors. Pair of scissors, this one we have them at home, and we have ever used them. With a pair of scissors, as I've drawn it here, what you're cutting, if you're cutting a piece of paper, that piece of paper becomes the Lord. The piece of paper that you're cutting, or anything that you're cutting, that one becomes the Lord. Then, the pivot is that point where those two blades, they meet, they are joined. That is what we call the pivot here. Then the effort is the area where you put your hand, where you fix your fingers when you're cutting. When you're cutting, that area where you fix your fingers, that one becomes the effort. Therefore, according to our definition, a pair of scissors qualifies to be grouped under first-class levers because the pivot is between the Lord and the effort. We come to the fifth example of first-class levers, where we are talking about a beam balance. Please, I want us to get these things very well. There is a difference between a beam balance and a weighing scale. Children tend to confuse these two things. This one is a beam balance. A weighing scale is normally used in shops for measuring sugar, mainly in shop, that short scale that is used in the shop for weighing sugar. That is what we call the weighing scale. However, this one here is called the beam balance, and it is mainly used. This one you normally find them in the places where they sell meat. It is used in butchers where they normally use this. Now, this beam balance qualifies to be grouped under first-class levers because we are seeing, on this side we are seeing this, we have named it the Lord. This stone here that is used, 2 kilograms weighing stone, 3 kilogram weighing stone, that one becomes our Lord to be overcome. Then on this side where you may put, or where you put meat, where you're putting meat, that one we are calling it the effort. Because now on this stone here, when you're putting meat here, you will need to put meat here until this stone balances with this meat on this side. Therefore, this one will need to overcome this force here. So this one is the Lord, this is the effort. Where is the pivot on this beam balance? The pivot is found here, on this point here, where I have marked with the letter P. This is the pivot, where this lever can balance. This is the pivot. I repeat this. This type of scale is called a beam balance. A weighing scale is normally used in shops. Then we have also what we call the spring balance. I believe you learned about those things in primary 5 when you talk about measurements. Spring balance, a weighing scale, then you talk about a beam balance. Those are some of the types of scales that we have. So this one here is another example of a first-class lever. The sixth example of a first-class lever, we have what we call water pump. Water pump. In a local man's language, we call it a borehole. A water pump or a borehole, as you know, scientifically we call it a water pump. Now, a water pump is an example of a first-class lever. Now here we wonder, how comes that it is grouped under first-class levers? This one is very simple. This one here is the lever. Oh, let me call it the handle. Okay. It is the handle of the borehole. When you want water to come from here, this is where you hold and you start pumping until water comes out from this nozzle. Now, when you're handling here and pumping, you are applying force. You apply force to make sure that water comes from here. Therefore, this one is the effort. That handle where you apply force to bring out water is the effort. While this handle here is attached with a certain screw on this, on the metallic part of this water pump here. Now, there is an attachment of this handle to this part of this this part of the water pump. When you're pumping from here, this one here, the handle always rotates from this point here, inside the water pump. When they open that water pump, you will see this part here. Now, this part here is what we call the pivot, where this one rotates. When you're pumping it, this is where it moves. And as you pump, as you continue lifting this side up and down, this water pump, remember there is a hole down here. When they are making the water pump, they drill a very deep hole here, and they put many pipes to go down deep there, where up to the point where there is water. Therefore, these pipes here, you cannot use your hand just to bring them out. If you are to open this, then it needs like 5 people to remove these pipes from here. But can you imagine, for you when you're pumping from here, it needs only you, not any other person. Therefore, these pipes, as these arrows are showing, these pipes are the load that we are to overcome using this effort. Therefore, a water pump has the effort here, then we have the pivot, then we have the load. The load is the water pipes that goes down to bring water. Therefore, the pivot is in between the load and the effort. That's why a water pump is called a first-class lever, because the pivot is between the load and the effort. Lastly, to look at an example of a first-class lever, we are talking about the lid opener. Lid opener. The lid opener simply, if for some people who have ever eaten tinned food, the food that is tinned, you can use a lid opener to open that tin. Therefore, the top of that tin, that part that you need to remove, that part there, that is what we call the load. And in between that tin opener within here, in between the load and the tin opener, where you rotate that lid opener, when you're opening that tin, where that lid opener rotates, that one creates what we call the fulcrum or the pivot, where it rotates from within that lid that you're opening. And the effort is that part that you hold, for you, where you hold when you're opening, that one becomes the effort. Where that lid opener moves in between the lid, that one becomes the fulcrum or the pivot. Looking at the examples of the first-class levers, I believe we have all got this, and I request you to still go through this. Don't just hear now and you put it away. but continue revising them so that you get them into you. Let these examples sink into your mind so that tomorrow when we come back and we start looking at second-class levers, you will not be in position to confuse first-class levers with the second-class levers. Therefore, before I give you time to rest, I would like us to look at a simple exercise that we have this side. This exercise is mainly on these levers here that we have been learning. Number one, we are saying define the term first-class levers. Define the term first-class levers. Using the acronym that I've given you, I believe you will not get a challenge to define that term, first-class levers. Number two, name 4 examples of first-class levers. Name 4 examples of first-class levers. I believe everyone will pass that. Number 3, this one I'm giving you as the homework. At least you'll get the way of draw a pair of pliers. This one is your homework. I want you to get, at least, you have to get to know what is a plier, because when I talk about a plier right now, you will not understand it very well. But ask mommy or daddy, at least to get let mommy or daddy show you what we call a pair of pliers if you have one at home. So number 3 is instructing us to draw a pair of pliers and show the following parts. 1, we are saying, show the Lord. Show the Lord on that pair of pliers. Number 4, we are saying the diagram below shows the human arm. Using an arrow with the letter S, show the pivot from the human arm. The whole of the human arm as we are seeing it from up to the other side. Where do we find a pivot on the human arm as it is drawn here? Thank you very much for being attentive. I wish you the nice time. Keep safe and help your parents to do work. Bye-bye.